This is The Full View, bringing you the latest news from across South Africa and the continent, starting in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF presidential candidate Emmerson Mnangagwa and MDC Alliance candidate Nelson Chamisa wrapped up their election campaigns in Zimbabwe's capital. The leaders tried hard to sway the 20% undecided electorate. While they are both confident of victory, only one candidate will emerge from Monday's poll. Let's now cross live to Harare, where our reporter Chriselda Lewis is standing by. Chriselda, ZANU-PF's Legal Affairs Secretary Paul Mangwana said this rally, which they dubbed a victory rally, will put the final nail in the opposition's coffin. What is the sense on the ground?
Well, a very good evening to you, Adriana. Just before I get to that, it was certainly a show of force by two of this country's biggest political parties holding their final rallies just kilometers apart, away from each other, here in the city of Harare, with ZANU-PF, of course, holding its rally at the National Sports Stadium, as well as the MDC Alliance holding theirs at Freedom Square. And certainly, I think both of these presidential candidates, as you said, are seeming very confident, but the rhetoric seemed to be quite different. If you listen carefully to what they said, with Emmerson Mnangagwa saying that he believes ZANU-PF will win the elections on Monday, and you have Nelson Chamisa, who is the leader of the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, saying he believes that the MDC Alliance has already won. So while both may seem confident in the run-up to this election on Monday, really the rhetoric is slightly different, in that the rhetoric that seems to be coming from the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance seems to suggest that there might perhaps be a challenge of some sort if Emmerson Mnangagwa does emerge as the winner in Monday's election. I think if we also look at the demographics, you'd find that at the stadium, at the National Sports Stadium, where ZANU-PF was holding its rally, you had a bit of senior citizens there. And if you looked on the other side with the MDC Alliance, you found a much younger crowd. Could this perhaps suggest that Nelson Chamisa is the one whose messages resonate with the young people of Zimbabwe? Because if you'd look at the challenges that the country is facing, you'd find young people bearing the brunt of joblessness, as well as some of the challenges, in addition, the economic challenges that this country is facing. One of the other important aspects that I must add to there, Adriana, is that perhaps if you look at where ZANU-PF held its rally, you know that ZANU-PF's stronghold would be more in the rural areas, and with the MDC having their strongholds in urban areas. For ZANU-PF to have held its final rally in the backyard of the stronghold of the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance perhaps would not have been such a good idea. If you look at the numbers, we cannot quantify exactly at this stage, but it was quite a sea of red that we saw at Freedom Square, where thousands of Movement for Democratic Change Alliance faithful supporters, members had gathered there. So while there's much confidence, what we're hearing on the ground as well, there's a whole lot of call for change, Adriana, to answer your question. A lot of change. That change, when I say change, I actually mean that irrespective of who these Zimbabweans will put their mark next to come Monday's election, what they want to see across the board, what is similar, is that they're talking about development for this country. Whoever is going to be able to resuscitate and take Zimbabwe back to the breadbasket that it once was on the African continent.
Now, Chriselda, before I speak to Mr. Chamisa's statement of generational change, speaking to the more younger voters, let's speak about this concept of change. Earlier when we crossed to you, we saw thousands of supporters chanting, "We want change." Now, Mnangagwa also stated that we are in a new Zimbabwe. Do you think this is a turning point for Zimbabwean politics and economics?
I think over the past couple of months, while Emmerson Mnangagwa was running his campaign rallies, the sentiment that he was really trying to put out there to ordinary Zimbabweans is that this is a new era for Zimbabwe. while it may still be the same political party that experienced a massive strife under the administration of former President Robert Mugabe, there's a new man at the helm of ZANU-PF saying that he would be the one who would be able to woo investors back into the country, who would be able to change the fortunes of Zimbabwe. And given the fact that you would know, last year in November, when there were those protests calling for the resignation of the former President Robert Mugabe, which eventually were successful, we saw the fall of Mugabe. Then, when Emmerson Mnangagwa came in, one of the first things that he spoke about was jobs, jobs, jobs. That certainly puts out a message that Emmerson Mnangagwa believes that while this may be the same political party, there's a new person in charge who has the best interests of the Zimbabwean people at heart. And you have Nelson Chamisa on the other hand that is saying this is a crossover moment. In fact, they termed this final rally of theirs the crossover rally, basically saying that the era of ZANU-PF is over. They believe, and they do believe, that they do have the necessary means to take Zimbabwe forward. The generational aspect also is that you would find that from what we have been gauging, Adriana, is that with the ZANU-PF constituencies, you would find that this is much more of the older generation. You find that Zimbabwe's ZANU-PF's stronghold is more in the rural areas, perhaps those who would always refer to the liberation struggle here in Zimbabwe. But of course, you would have those who are followers, members and party faithfuls of the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, who would say, yes, we know that there was a great struggle here in Zimbabwe for freedom, but the current challenges that we are facing are direct challenges of food, of joblessness, of education, of infrastructure that has long collapsed, and an economy that is not functioning, and they want those particular issues to be addressed. So on the issue of generational, I would also find that ZANU-PF is also alluding to that and promising young people opportunities as well. So while you have similar messages perhaps in various aspects from both of these political parties, Monday will certainly be the telltale of whether these two political parties have even managed to convince the 20% of the undecided electorate. Today was D-Day. The final word has been said, and Monday certainly will be that telltale once they go to the polls.
Thank you very much, Chriselda. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but thank you so much for that update. That was our reporter, Chriselda Lewis, who was attending both election rallies in Zimbabwe. She gave us the latest on what is happening in Zimbabwe 48 hours before the historic elections.